Good morning to you all. I'm not sure in which language I woke up this morning, but I'll try my best. I want to express my gratitude to General Secretary Thomas Kemper and the entire Global Ministries community for the privilege you have given me to come and share with you. I read a statement in David Scott's comment as he was interacting with us through emails, and he was very clear that we do not expect very academic papers, thanks be to God. David, am I right? Friends, I have to say that I see myself as an African. And I claim my Africanness wherever I go. But I also see myself as a global citizen. I see myself as somebody who has been exposed to various cultures. And I also see myself as somebody who has been exposed to foreign intellectual, theological thoughts, yet I continue to struggle to cook a theology in an African pot. And I recognize that it is probably the most complex and difficult time in the United Methodist Church to be an African. Yes, it is. As I read comments, as I hear stories, as I watch conversations, as I remember some of our legislative processes, my heart continues to be heavy. This reminds me that even in the early church, there were disagreement. And I can submit to the body that there were indeed deep disagreement among those who have claimed to be apostles. And somebody reminded me that the most critical criteria for one to qualify as an apostle was one to have learned from the Lord Jesus Christ as a disciple, but also to be the one who has witnessed the kerygma, to be the one who has seen Christ's ministry, Christ's suffering, Christ's difficult time in Gethsemane, Christ being nailed at the cross, Christ dying and being confused if indeed his theories of resurrection were accurate or if his body was stolen. But I hear that it was critical for one to have witnessed the risen Lord to qualify as somebody who should be called an apostle. I continue to be shocked that when I read the text of the Bible, many of the wonderful, strong women who stayed with Christ even when the most powerful men left him were not counted as apostles, and some of their stories did not make it through canonization. I continue to remember that a black man by the name of Simon the Cyrene was probably the one who helped Christ to carry the cross for a little while. And yet, his stories is probably forgotten. I realize that, well, maybe I am caught between Jerusalem and Antioch. Because the two schools of thought were really struggling. But as I read that specific text, I'm also reminded that regardless of the disagreement that occurred between James, Peter, and John, in fact, James was the Lord's brother, and Paul did not stop Paul for bringing even apportionment to the church in Jerusalem. In fact, Jerusalem enjoyed each time Paul would bring what he called the collection from the saints, even when these saints were told that they needed to abide by the Jewish law before making it in the emerging Christian community. Friends, it is in that context that I wanted to share with you, with heavy heart, with critiques around me as an African. And I wanted to remind the body that 200 years of mission remind us that once Africa was indeed a field of mission. Where several people showed up in order to share the gospel. For the sake of my presentation, I would like to stick with Leslie Newbegin, who doesn't make any distinction between mission and evangelism. In fact, he believes that the two cannot be separated. Friends, John Wesley emerged as a prophetic leader who gave hope to the people at the margins and advocated for them as he sought to bring about social change as an expression of social holiness. Well, during that time, England was going through difficult time of injustice, of poverty. And that was in the 18th century, where there was a noble class that was enjoying all the resources, and there were a significant class of poor and marginalized who were completely neglected even by the church institution. I will argue that the above description of England of the 18th century is very similar to the current situation of the 21st century North Katanga in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Since its independence, the country experienced several wars, violence which killed several millions of people and displaced many more, especially women and children. God initiated a missionary movement that will bring about hope for the future in North Katanga area and the DR Congo in general. There are key figures that need to be highlighted, and you may have read in your history. Bishop William Taylor was assigned as the Bishop of Africa by the Methodist Episcopal Church in 1984. who was very much driven by Paul Tillich theological thoughts, Bishop Adzel, Bishop Mackenzie Springer, and a local Congolese by the name of Kayek Changand, who was a former slave, who was educated and could speak a little bit of English. I cannot forget the work of the first Congolese black bishop, Bishop Shungu, who worked for the advancement of the North Katanga area. And just last year, the North Katanga celebrated its 50 years of existence. It became a provisional annual conference in 1968. Coincidentally, that was also the same year that the United Methodist Church came into existence. Right from the beginning, the missionary movement invested in education as a way of building capacity of the local people, but also creating a peaceful society which will resist wars and violence. Let me emphasize that the earlier conflict before and after independence were mostly about one ethnic group fighting against the other. Other conflicts were scarcity-based, where individuals and ethnic groups fought for the access to basic human needs, such as water, food, and as a farming society, they really fought to have a little piece of land. As an alternative to combat poverty and malnutrition, early missionaries taught local people, especially pastors and the laity, to engage in small-scale farming. In addition, they invested significantly in health ministry throughout the DR Congo. I continue to hold my argument in the words of Leslie Newbegin that it is indeed difficult to separate mission and evangelism in his book, The Open Secret. Friends, as I want to speak to you from the heart, for us in North Katanga, mission, God's mission, emerged as a tool for peacemaking. People argue that peacemaking is a process where a conflict is being transformed from being violent to opening opportunities for dialogue, negotiations. And through mission, we learned that it was critical for communities to learn how to share the water that they have because a water well has been drilled, and make sure that especially the most marginalized, the children, the powerless, will have access first to the water. Mission as peace building, we are also reminded that peace building is a process by which structures that reflect injustices are dealt with. In fact, they are being replaced by programs that will seek equity, equality, so that people will have access to resources without being left out. I will submit that this is probably the area that needs to continue. As we are building health facilities with the support of global ministries, as we are building schools, as we are working on agricultural programs, we are also building capacity for the people so that we can deal with all those structures of injustices that did not allow a certain class of people to have access to resources, even to learn about some of the skills. At this juncture, as I go back in the history of mission, I'm also reminded that at some point in my country, mission was also abusively used as a tool of colonization. Congo is a country full of mineral resources. Congo holds 60% of the world reserve of coltan, the mineral that is used to make cell phones. Congo has the highest reserve of cobalt, a critical metal that is being used in special alloys that will make electrical batteries. Congo has the largest reserve of flora and fauna that can actually sustain the world. And yet, at some point in history, someone by the name of King Leopold, with the complicity of religion, had Congo as his private property. I will submit that you can go and read King Leopold's Ghost. Then you will know that this individual made himself rich. He became so rich that he could no longer hold Congo as a personal property. He then transferred to the Kingdom of Belgium. My forefathers and foremothers, in the name of mission and religion, were sent straight into the Lord's Prayer and the biblical text, reminding them that it was best for them to stay poor. And they needed only to think about God's kingdom and not be worried about all resources that were around them. They were told to spend more times in the church praying. But I'm also reminded that the same rule took away all the cultural heritage from my people in the name of religion. Some of our best cultural values were taken away. I will just give an example. In my society, among the Luba people, they were already environmental friendly, even when we were not talking about climate change. People were taught not to cut certain trees. Some were told, if you cut this tree, a ghost will follow you. In reality, they were only protecting the environment. All of these were considered to be superstitions and witchcraft. Overcoming wars, violence, and making peace requires us to also look at the history of the world and raise questions with Western civilizations. How much harm have you done to the people in the name of mission? And answering God's call is about listening to those voices and maybe seek for reparations. Belgium was built with the resources from Congo, and I've not seen any court proceedings where my country will request for reparations. Friends, I'm speaking from my heart. As an Episcopal area, we are focusing right now on the well-being of pastors, on the well-being of congregations, on the well-being of communities. We want to continue to provide health, care to the people, education, and have agricultural training. Also conduct some significant conflict resolution seminars. And through these wars, we also had a lot of young people who had no alternative if not of joining militia groups. In my conference, we set up a program where we are trying to reintegrate former child combatant. And we are claiming their human dignity. And we believe that through mission, they can be reconciled with themselves, but they can also be reconciled with the communities as they request for forgiveness, but they also learn a vocational skill that can bring income in their pocket at the same time, contribute to the living, the well-being of our communities. I have a story to tell. That when you remove the United Methodist Church in my area, there will not be life. When you remove the church from the people, there will not be education. There will not be food security. The church, through its mission, has become the center of hope, the center of development, and the center of the building of the national fabric through peace and reconciliations. I would like to probably go through my conclusion and appealing to Methodists around the world and United Methodists. Let's reflect a little bit on the field of mission. I'm glad that I've worked for global ministries. Sometimes there was only one part that was the field of mission. And then the World Council of Churches talked about mission in all continents. Our own global ministries led us into what they call mission from everywhere to everywhere. I'm still raising this question. Are you ready to be a field of mission where people will come from somewhere else, from the margins? As I reflect on overcoming wars, violence, and political, social, and economic challenges, we held our politicians accountable in our area. When we experienced the most tragic militia conflict in our country, the church, under the leadership of Bishop Tambo, stepped up and created space for dialogue and peacemaking between warring parties. And we were able to use our prophetic voice and be the salt of the world and help those people to be in peace. And we continued to work for change in our country. We strive to be a democratic society. We advocated for peace in the DRC. We were supported by all Methodists, all agencies, United Methodist Women, Church and Society. We went around US policymakers and European policymakers because we knew that they were external actors who were playing a role in the situation in our country. And as church, we came together as religious communities and spoke with one voice in order to bring about peace in our country. This is the third time that we have held democratic elections since our independence in 1960. My appeal to the church as we reflect in the next 100 years, Do we still have our prophetic voice that can affect positively our politics? Or is politics affecting our theology? I'm actually appealing to our theologians to reflect critically on our public theology. Because I can say without doubt that we see that indeed politics is driving the conversations in our church when it comes to standing on social issues. Mission should continue to unite us. Mission should continue to lead us into seeking ways of reconciling with one another. Mission should continue to teach us into curving political powers and bringing social and economic change in our respective countries. I want to thank all of you for listening to this short testimony. Thank you.